couple days since Liberation Day, and we've started to see some of the fallout from Trump's announcements. Obviously, the markets are tanking, but more interestingly, we're seeing what other world leaders are saying and how they're going to react to this and how they're going to deal with it. And I think very quickly, at least in my opinion, you're seeing the huge problems that this policy is going to have and the things that Trump is going to have to deal with sooner rather than later. And so going back to my stream from Friday, where I talked about this a bit, the question is this the art of the many deals? Was the result that he's getting what he wanted to get? Or is this a Cadmean victory? A Cadmean victory being somewhat similar to a Pyrrhic victory, but let's just dive into it. So, as everybody knows, Trump has placed tariffs on most of the world's countries. Now, what's interesting is this was largely on the pretext, or at least rhetorically on the pretext, that these countries were taking advantage of America. They had unfair trade practices. They were preventing American goods from coming to market. They had tariffs. They had trade barriers. And he had to take this action to protect America from these foreign countries. Now, I had always thought that this was kind of a victim complex thing, but someone pointed out that this is probably to get around Congress. Congress has the power of the purse, and they're the only one who can pass legislation to raise revenue. So if these tariffs were a revenue-raising tool, then Trump would have no ability to unilaterally impose them. But if they're a national security tool, then yeah, maybe he can actually get away with it, and maybe some court will uphold that it's legal for him to do this. So I think that's the reason it's being framed the way it is in order to get around Congress and the Constitution when it comes to the powers of taxation. Now, the problem, though, with this rhetoric and the whole kind of narrative that America's problem is that these other countries have trade barriers is I don't think ultimately America's problem is its lack of exports. I think it's its over-reliance on imports. If you're not producing products, if your products aren't competitive to begin with, it doesn't really matter what trade barriers other countries have. If America can't produce certain things and it can't produce them for a price that anyone's willing to pay for, even without any kind of tariff barriers, then this whole thing is completely pointless. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of things that America can produce competitively or that only they can produce. Their trade deficit, in my view, largely comes from an over-reliance on imports due to their internal industry being hollowed out. So would it be nice if America was exporting more? Yes, it would be. But there's deeper structural problems regarding the American economy that would need to be ironed out first. Maybe tax cuts, deregulation. There's all kinds of stuff that would have to be dealt with if America was to become a competitive country on the international market. So what I think Trump is trying to do is there is this concept, and I remember I studied this a lot in my Latin America classes in university, is called import substitution industrialization, or in this case, import substitution reindustrialization. So this is something that a lot of third world or developing countries do, wherein they put very heavy tariffs and restrictions on imports of certain domestic industries to provide a huge advantage to local industry. The local industry may not be very efficient or developed or even really exist, but by restricting access to foreign supply and making it more expensive, the way that markets work is that people within the country will start finding local ways of getting a hold of it, either produced within the country or produced from a rival or another country that they have freer trade with. So the idea is, okay, well, companies keep buying cheap steel from maybe America. We'll put a big tariff on the American steel so that it's more expensive than our domestically produced steel. And this will give our companies time to build things up and get that industry going. And then later, when we start taking away some of the tariffs and the restrictions, and we start trading a bit more on the international market, we will have an industry that can actually compete as opposed to just getting completely steamrolled. So I think this is probably more what Trump is doing, is The goal is to dramatically reduce imports, or rather make imports look a lot less attractive, in order to kind of force America to reindustrialize, in order to force kind of a lot of these things they're importing from China or Vietnam or Korea or wherever to be made domestically. And once again, this gets into the debate as over which is more important, jobs and the overall health of the economy or consumer prices, because the domestically produced goods are going to be more expensive. They're probably going to be a lot more expensive, but it's funding the economy within a country as opposed to it being sent overseas. So it's kind of a pick your poison thing. And I think what Trump decided was this was better than letting things go on as is. It's better to try to do this, to try to save what's left of American industry and rebuild it, even if that means higher consumer prices. The issue, though, is, and once again, they're going to need this protectionism, not just in the short term, but in the medium term, or maybe even in the long term. Now, hopefully, it's going to be reduced over time. But let's be honest, could America ever really compete in like the garment industry with Vietnam or Thailand or someplace in Africa where people get paid like a couple dollars a week or $1 a day or however much it is? Could like the salaries, the benefits, the regulations that are required in America to produce the same products ever be mitigated to the point that it would be competitive without some sort of barrier to prevent the cheaper products from entering? Now, a lot of people will say, well, there's automation, there's new technology, there's efficiency, and I agree with that. But once again, you have to build that up first. All of that stuff requires huge capital investments. You need to get the factories built, and then you need to get the factories updated. So once again, I think the idea here is it's better for us to try to address the root cause of the issue, even if that means higher consumer prices. So I took me a while, but I came up with kind of an example of what I mean. These numbers aren't perfect, but I hopefully people get kind of the point I'm going with. The problem America faces is not so much, like I said earlier, trade barriers in other countries. It's that their products aren't competitive. This is a problem a lot of first world countries have with third world countries. And generally speaking, governments and consumers, even if they complain about it, are willing to go along with it because of how much cheaper the goods are from the countries. So my argument is, if you got what Donald Trump allegedly wanted, which is these countries removed their tariffs, they removed their trade barriers, they removed their quotas. American goods are able to flow into their countries on completely equal terms. They probably wouldn't in a lot of cases. Why would Vietnam buy T-shirts or some other cheap good from America when it's like 20, 40 times as expensive as what they're able to create in their own country? Worse still, because of the whole reciprocal tariff thing, if Trump was to make these deals, it would probably result in America having to remove its tariffs as well. So the way I put it is, it's making it easier to not sell anything. It's removing the barriers to something that people won't buy anyways. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of products that America could sell to various countries, and this might make more sense with other developed countries. But if we were to get what Trump presumably wants, and you were going to have like all the trade restrictions between America and Vietnam axed, I don't think it would. I could be wrong. I don't think it would go well for the U.S. in a lot of cases. So I kind of came up with this to kind of prove my point. So this is the sale price of a T-shirt in USA. I'm just going with T-shirts because it's something people know, and because it's something that's produced. It's a garment industry thing that's produced a lot in the third world. So currently, this is the scenario. These numbers are kind of arbitrary, but they're to give you the idea. So an American-produced T-shirt in America costs about $30. With tariffs raising the price of a foreign T-shirt, it's $20. So it's cheaper, it's more competitive, but it's slightly less so because of the tariffs. if we were going to have this art of the deal and remove all tariffs, a scenario you might have is something like this. Obviously, the price of the US produced good doesn't change because it doesn't face tariffs in the United States. The Vietnamese item, though, no longer does as well. So it becomes much cheaper. And so it becomes relatively a lot more competitive than it already even is. Now, if we look at Vietnam, we also get kind of the point I'm trying to go across. So we're going to say that with tariffs, the price of a US t-shirt in Vietnam is $40. If Vietnam were to remove its tariffs, that price of the shirt would be the same as what it is in the United States, which would be $30. Now, is that competitive with the $12 that it is in Vietnam? No, it's not competitive, and I'm sure some luxury goods you might be able to. But the point I'm trying to make is I think there's probably going to be a lot of cases like this wherein the agreements are almost entirely going to hurt America, even if rhetorically they're really important. So that's kind of the issue. The issue is that this thing fails if it succeeds. Already we're getting a whole bunch of countries, I think the EU, India, Vietnam, Japan, who are going to Trump and going, okay, let's make a deal. Let's do just a total free trade deal. We'll remove all barriers and you'll remove all barriers. And to a certain extent, it's like, well, Trump succeeded. Trump won. He got what he said that he wanted to get at the beginning of this, which was fair trade deals, which was barriers removed. But as I said, I don't think that really helps America. Once again, I think that was all just rhetoric and deflection to try to get it to enable him to pass these tariffs around the revenue restrictions because of the Constitution. So if these countries actually do renegotiate the deals the way that Trump wants them to, once again, there's certain products, but it's just going to make the scenario way worse than what the original situation was, because then America will have no protection from these cheap goods. So what he really wanted, at least this is my interpretation, if we're going down an ISI or industrial substitution, industrialization route, is for these tariffs to stay up indefinitely, to allow American industry to rebuild, to try to reproduce these products on a domestic level. But if people just immediately concede and they go, okay, we're going to go with the art of the many deals, we're just all going to ask for that. And so if you're Trump, what do you do at this point in time? If you stick by the original plan and you just keep all the tariffs and trade barriers up, you'll be exposed that the whole thing was basically just a scam. It was just an attempt to get around Congress, and you're going to look really bad if you're complaining, oh, Vietnam has these tariff barriers, and Vietnam's like, okay, we'll get rid of them, and Trump's like, no, that's not what I actually want. And I mean, there's only so long that he can kind of equivocate and try to manage the situation. So I don't know what he's going to do, because it's looking like all these countries are saying they're going to renegotiate. Now, China is not, and China is the single most important country to not renegotiate and restricting access from there. But if a whole bunch of these countries that Trump needs to shield America from are saying, okay, well, put your money where your mouth is, we'll call your bluff, I think it could actually probably go really bad, and this whole thing could be worse. So in a sense, Trump would succeed. That's where the Cadmean victory comes in. He would succeed in getting the other countries to lower their trade barriers to achieve what the stated goal of his enterprise is, but it would put America in a worse place, and it would be kind of a disaster. So that's, I think, where we are at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how this thing happens in the days ahead. But anyways, guys, God bless. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to y'all again real soon.